clock that was ticking in my home. Changed my state of mind.
Ladies and
Love
gentlemen,
so hard to find.
we got him.
So let's get to it. This Baylor team is looking really solid. I'm loving what that's going down there in Texas. I do expect them to move by Manhattan and most likely Rutgers with ease. We then go to the Sacramento part of this region, where I do like Wichita State to get by North Carolina State and Villanova. I like that Wichita State team. They're battle-tested, well-coached as always, and they have the talent to get it done. When you go to the Tampa part of this draw, this Arkansas team is one of a kind. Eric Musselman has completely changed Arkansas basketball. He's turned that program around. I do think that big things are ahead of them. When it starts this year, I do expect them to make it to the Sweet 16 and get by Oklahoma and Florida State. And then when you go to the Cleveland part, I'm loving this Florida team. They have the talent to get it done. If they get hot at the right time, they can be one of the best teams in the country, and I expect them to get by Stanford and Michigan State to advance to the Sweet 16. So let me see a Baylor-Wichita State matchup where I'm going to pick the Baylor Bears. I think the talent is just a little bit more proven on Baylor, and with that being said, I do think that's a very close game. It would not surprise me if Wichita State shocked the world and pull off the upset, but I do like Baylor advancing to the Elite Eight, and I am going to take Florida over the Arkansas Razorbacks. They're going to get hot, and this Florida team, as good as Arkansas is, I think gets them in a close one and advances to the Elite Eight. And I like Florida over Baylor. As I've been saying this entire time, Florida gets hot. And, that Baylor team, that coach hasn't been there, but Florida has. And, Florida's battle-tested. They have all the wins. They're hot. One of arguably the hottest team in the country at this point. I'm taking Florida. I do like Kansas here over Princeton. I think Kansas is a really good team. I don't think Princeton is a very good team. And I do see Kansas beating Illinois. I love Io. I love those big men on Illinois, but I do think it's not enough to beat Kansas. Then we go to Greensboro, and this is my first, huge upset of the tournament. I think Georgia State beats Louisville and goes on to beat Ohio State to advance to the Sweet 16. Georgia State's been there before, not the same coach, but they have a winning culture, and I do think they advance to play Kansas in the Sweet 16. Then you go to Tampa. Wisconsin Liberty. That's a toss-up game. But, I do see a big Reverend Pritzel 3 to win the game down the stretch. Probably low scoring. I'd say 31-28 final score. And then we get the matchup that we should have seen in November between Auburn and Wisconsin. And I do think Wisconsin beats Auburn by a few. Not as close as the Liberty game, because obviously Wisconsin plays up to the level of their opponents and down to the level of their opponents. I do see Wisconsin making through to the Sweet 16. And they will be facing Arizona. The Wildcats are a solid team. I'm not sold on Butler yet. I do think Arizona moves by BYU and Butler without much problems at all to set up a Sweet 16 matchup with Wisconsin. And we'll start there. Obviously, these two teams, Arizona and Wisconsin, have a lot of history with each other in the month of March. And I do like Wisconsin to come out of that. Once again, Wisconsin has the playmakers. And, if they get hot and they're shooting the ball, they're going to be really hard to beat. And then I do see Kansas beating Georgia State. Obviously, Georgia State's Cinderella run will come to an end at the hands of Kansas. And I do like Wisconsin to beat the Kansas Jayhawks in the Elite Eight to advance to the Final Four to play the Florida Gators. So in this region, the one-seed Gonzaga Bulldogs will play the Grambling State, whatever they are. And I do think this is the second 16-over-1 seed upset of all time. I do like Grambling State here over Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga will come out slow, and I think Grambling State will make them pay. And I do see Grambling State losing to a really good Penn State team. Lamar Stevens is something else. And Penn State has rough riders over there. I think they get it done against Grambling. We head to Albany. Stephen F. Austin, obviously they have the big win of the year. Arguably the biggest upset of the decade over the Duke Blue Devils. But I do think Maryland is too good. And I think they'll move by SFA and Duquesne without much problems whatsoever. And then we head to Spokane. I do like the Oregon Ducks, coming over or beating UC Irvine. Obviously, that's a rematch of last year's second round, but I do like, third round technically, but round of 32. I do like Oregon beating UC Irvine and then beating Kentucky. And then we head to Sacramento, and I do see Purdue beating Memphis and SDSU. Obviously, the same thing with Gonzaga. I'm not sold on SDSU. I think they'll come in slow, and I think that the Purdue Boilermakers, who are battle tested, will make them pay. Then we see Penn State playing Maryland. Obviously, this is a region where you have 3 Big Ten teams in the Sweet 16. And I do see Penn State beating Maryland just because of the fact that Lamar Stevens is able to take over the game when he needs to. And I think that proves to be too much for Maryland. And I do like Oregon to beat Purdue. Obviously, Peyton Pritchard is one of the best players in the country, and I think he takes over in that game. And then a battle of, Lamar Stevens and Peyton Pritchard in the Elite Eight. I do like Oregon and Peyton Pritchard to come through there. Obviously, I think Oregon is really good. They have more pieces to surround Peyton Pritchard with than Penn State does to surround Lamar Stevens with. And I think that leads to an Oregon Ducks Final Four berth. And here we have the Duke Blue Devils going up against most likely LSU in the second round. I do like Duke to prevail. I think Duke's a really good basketball team, and I don't think they'll have much problems whatsoever playing LSU or Indiana, whichever team it is. They will roll through, and I do think they will meet a Michigan Wolverines team in the Sweet 16. East Tennessee State has been in the tournament for a few years now. Not every year, but in recent memory they have been. But I do not think they give Michigan much problems. I think Michigan's able to roll by Seton Hall without much issues either. Then we head to St. Louis, where I do think we see the Iowa Hawkeyes beat their in-state rival Northern Iowa and Dayton. Obviously Dayton's a really good basketball team, but I do think with Iowa's dual threat of Frank Wieskamp and Luke Garza, it is too much and overpowers Dayton. And then I see West Virginia rolling through, Creighton most likely, and into the Sweet 16, where they will play the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I do like West Virginia there. Obviously, Bob Huggins is a great coach, and I do think he will outcoach Fran McCaffrey in that one. And then I'm going to take Michigan. Michigan over Duke. Something about this Michigan team. They'll play well down the stretch, and I do think they work their way to the Elite Eight. And then I like Michigan to beat West Virginia. I think West Virginia is really good. But I do think that, with the likes of Xavier Simpson and John Teskey, Isaiah Livers will be back by then. It's just going to prove to be too much. And, Michigan will be hot. They always seem to be this time of year. And I think it leads to them punching their ticket to the Final Four. And in a rematch of an earlier game this year, I do like Oregon to beat Michigan. I think Oregon's just too good. And, Oregon's got the playmakers, the shot makers, and they already did it once against Michigan this year. I think they find a way to do it again. And in a rematch of the worst March Madness game of all time, I do like the Florida Gators to prevail. Obviously, this one will sting for all the fellow Wisconsin fans out there. Being a Florida fan myself, this one makes me extremely happy. Obviously, these two teams have some history, and I do think that, Florida with Kerry Blackshear and Nebhard, they just have more talent, and they'll work their way past Brevin Pritzel and those Badgers. I do like Florida over Oregon. Obviously, Florida was my preseason pick, and I do think they get the job done down the stretch. We'll see you next year.